What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you. But they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it.
This is episode 53 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter. The basic training camp was designed to undermine all the past concepts of beliefs of the new recruit, to undermine his civilian values, to change his self-concept, subjugating him entirely to the military system. That was in a book by Ben Shallot, The Psychology of Conflict and Combat. Classic Pavlovian conditioning can be done with earthworms, and operant Skinnerian conditioning can be conducted on rats and pigeons. But there is a third level of learning that pretty much only primates and humans are capable of, and that is what is called social learning. This third level of learning, in its most powerful form, revolves primarily around the observations and imitations of a role model, unlike operant conditioning. In social learning, it is not essential that the learner be directly reinforced in order for learning to take place. This means that you can learn behavior and form attitudes and beliefs by seeing a role model get rewarded for behavior. This includes role models in TV, movies, and video games. What is important in social learning is to understand the characteristics that can lead to the selection of a specific individual as a role model. The processes that make someone a desirable role model include variant reinforcements or vicarious reinforcements. You see the role model being reinforced in a manner that you can experience vicariously. Similarity to the learner. You perceive that the role model has a key trait that makes him or her similar to you. Social power. The role model has a power to reward but does not necessarily do so. Status envy. You envy the role model's receipt of rewards from others. An analysis of these processes can help us understand the role of the drill sergeant as a role model in violence enabling in military training. And it can help us understand why a new type of violent role model is so popular among Americans' youth. Violence, role models, and drill sergeants in basic training. From this time on, I will be your mother, your father, your sister, your brother. I will be your best friend and your worst enemy. I will be there to wake you up in the morning, and I will be there to tuck you in at night. You will jump when I say frog, and when I tell you, your only question will be, what color? Is that clear? And that's from Drill Sergeant G at Fort Ord, California in 1974, and he was the drill sergeant of my last guest last week, which was Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, and that excerpt is from his book on killing. And he talks about the interest of how it is a soldier or a civilian goes in the military and they have to break down, the military breaks down, and you see this in boot camp, and those of you that are listening that have been to boot camp understand that when you go in there, they break you down. They make you something else that you're not necessarily. They have to tear you away from that civilian mindset. They have to break you down to build you back up for that military mindset so they can prepare you to go out into the fleet. At least that's what we called it in the Marine Corps. You go out into the fleet, you go learn your MOS, you go get your job, you do your job, whether it's on the battlefield, whether it's on a ship, whatever the case is, you go out there, you do your job, and you're in the military. Your mindset is there. And all because they tore you away and made you become something that you didn't necessarily think you were. And they helped condition you to that mindset of violence, of battlefield conditioning, of the military mindset. Now, there is a level that the human, the American soldier now goes to as either if they're separating from the military or they're retiring, because you don't stay in the military your whole life. Well, I guess some do, and we thank you for them. We thank them for their service. However, there are people when they get out of the military, they are trying to figure out what to do. And we've talked about it before, where you're trying to figure out your next mission. What is your mission? What is it that you are going to go do next? Because there's a lot of trauma. There's maybe PTSD. There's whatever. There's just that separation anxiety that you're going from what you know, what you're comfortable with, where you know you're getting a solid paycheck, you're getting all these things, and now you're going into a whole new world. There is another side of things that people don't understand. And when businesses are going to hire veterans and what they're going to do, they don't realize this, but there is a lot of research that is done into this. And that basically that shows that veterans typically show up reliably and on time. They like to lead projects. They get tasks accomplished, and they deal with high pressure situations. So when you're dealing with a veteran, you're dealing with somebody who is able to do these things. Additionally, according to the Society of Human Resources Management Foundation, 68% of employers found that veterans perform better or much better than their civilian peers. 65% of veterans have some kind of college education or higher, making veterans more educated than their civilian peers. And 50% of veterans stay at their jobs longer than the median tenure of 2.5 years. Now, 2.5 years, that's, you got to be, people are saying, what, are you kidding me? Remember when careers were 20, 30, 40 years long? Well, now millennials, they want to stay at jobs for maybe a year, maybe 6 months, maybe whatever. And veterans are staying there longer. They're able to learn the job and determine how best to suit the situation, suit the company, suit the profession, whatever the case may be. I've noticed as a veteran that when you do things, you have a mindset in regards to doing what you're supposed to do, having that integrity, having honesty, having the ability to be relied on. And your boss doesn't have to always look over your shoulder. They might look over your shoulder to help you learn the situation or learn the job or whatever. But once you have it, they don't have to keep going on there. They want regular sit reps, which you're willing to give. They just want to know that the job's getting done, and it's getting done right, and they don't have to babysit you. They can go do their job, and it becomes a win-win for everybody. Now, there is a group out there. There are several people out there who work towards developing this support system for veterans and for the civilians in which support those veterans in that case. Not only are there people that are willing to do that, but they also do a ton of other things. And that brings us to today's guest. I can read all day long about this person's, their leadership, their awards, their previous positions, their certifications, their education, but I would rather have them tell you about it. And so I am pleased to introduce to you guys Lieutenant Colonel Kathy Galowitz of the United States Air Force. And I thank you for coming on. Good morning, Kathy. How are you today?
Good morning to you, Ken. Thank you for that great overview. You've done some awesome homework.
Yeah, I try to do a little bit. I'm smarter than I look. At least I try to be.
Oh. No, but I appreciate all that data and all the information about the strength of veteran talent. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. So you were a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and you were, how long were you in the Air Force?
So I spent 20 years full-time in uniform and then additional 9 part-time in the Guard or Reserve. Nice.
Thank you. And so you have since decided that you want to be there for the people in which you served with, and you want to be there to help them just continue to grow and serve other people in doing that process, correct?
Yes, my primary focus is to help our citizens, our people who have never served, help them understand how they can be more supportive. I call it cultivating civilian veteran champions. Nice. Because like you talked about, your Sergeant G drill sergeant, right? How we break down the civilian mindset, create a military mindset so that you can perform, stay safe, and do the brutal work that oftentimes needs to be done. But, we spend millions of dollars preparing our service members for that, which is absolutely critically important, so that mission focused teamwork, and courage is prevalent. But, when we leave service, take off our uniform, we do not really have a good process to unravel some of that stuff to help us go back into a less hierarchical community, to help us really, connect with people who are different from us. And so my goal is to help civilians know how to support troops better and become veteran champions.
Yeah, see, and that's perfect. That's that's a lot that people don't think about. They always think about, the veterans are coming, they've got PTSD or they've got whatever, and they're coming in here, they don't get along with everybody. Well, there's two sides of everything. It's not just they need to come in and they need to assimilate. Maybe people need to adjust for other people, and it's a two-way street, I think, a lot of times. So
there was a recent senatorial hearing where the Institute of Veterans and Military Families from Syracuse University spoke. And their statistic was that about $900 is spent per person who transitions out of the military to help them, get a foothold. And, that's just not cutting it. Clearly, when you compare the millions of dollars that are spent to, create that mighty military force.
Right.
And so I'm just very, I just see a huge gap, Ken, in how we help our military people when they take off their uniforms reintegrate into civilian society.
Yeah.
And if our neighbors, our coworkers, our employers, our faith communities, our educators, our lawyers, our doctors, if they can have some cultural competency, then it'll really help provide a softer landing pad, if you will. Right. Now, I can't do all that stuff myself, but I have had some exposure as the director of community outreach for the Ohio National Guard. I did interface with all of those groups when we built a never been done before statewide outreach office in response to 9/11. Because, as you know, our reserve component was deploying in a way that we never had in the history of our nation.
Right.
So I have a very broad appreciation and firsthand experience seeing how much civilians really do want to help and what's possible with a little bit of education, with a little bit of encouragement and support.
Right. So where did this come from? So let's go back in time and figure out who little Kathy was. Who was little Kathy that said, "Hey, I want to grow up to do this stuff"? Or did she say that? I mean, how did you grow up?
Oh no,
all that stuff.
Buddy, she did say that. This cultivating civilian veteran champions truly is my life's calling. This is what I was put on this earth to do. This is my purpose. And why is that? Well, because I grew up in an active duty Navy family. My father was a pilot and a communications guy. And so I just, moved around the world supporting his career. For instance, I was in preschool in Paris, France. So I learned to speak French fluently as a kid. Then in the middle of my junior year in high school, when I had the strongest sense of belonging I had ever experienced, I'd lived somewhere for 7 years in Fairfax, Virginia. Oh, by the way, let's see what else. I had a great swim team. I had friends in the neighborhood. I was in Girl Scouts, doing really well there. I just got my driver's license. I had my first boyfriend, right? And I was a varsity cheerleader. And that's big doings when you're a young girl. And my dad comes home. He was at the Pentagon, and he says, "Honey, I have orders to move to a small island in the North Atlantic Ocean."
Oh,
and
man.
And in the middle of my junior year in high school, and my dad offered me an opportunity to stay behind in that class of 400 that I was in. But instead, I opted to move with the family and graduate from a class of 30 in a Department of Defense high school in Keflavik, Iceland, right? Yeah. So, that really shifted my worldview. And it was generally a pretty positive experience. But then I went on to go to college in Munich, Germany, went to 3 colleges in 4 years to get my nursing degree. And then I joined the Air Force. My brother went to Annapolis, and so I just grew up with a really profound appreciation for my country. I wanted to serve my country. I believe in my country, and I wanted to do my part. And so then when I was on active duty in the Guard and the Reserve, it just really meant a lot to me. And I saw opportunities to serve in multiple ways, either in nursing or public affairs. And so then also I've been a military wife to an Air Force guy, now to a career retired Army veteran with 4 combat tours. My son was in the Army for a little bit. I've had the military just all around me in every aspect. And so I know a lot about it from a lot of different perspectives. And I've studied about it. I do a lot of reading and learning. And so it's a joy for me. It's a joy for me to do this work, because it's fundamentally a part of who I am. And just one more quick story. Uh-huh. So after I got off active duty and my husband got off active duty, we moved to Lancaster, Ohio, to give our sons roots, because I never had roots growing up, right? And to start a business. Well, after I'd been in this community for a while, we did start our business. I was very active in local chambers of commerce. And well, this gentleman that I really appreciated ended up having an unfortunate water skiing accident and was killed. So I went to his funeral, and, I was probably 35, maybe a little bit older than that. And it hit me that, I'd never been to a funeral before. Maybe my grandmother or my grandfather's funeral, but, I just hadn't experienced that much. Now, I'm not a combat veteran. Okay. So that's part of the situation. But so I started thinking about my life and all the moving I'd done. Before the age of 35, I had lived in at least 20 different communities.
Wow.
Now, that's not even houses, Ken, right? I mean, temporary houses, et cetera, et cetera. But that's just trying to get your feet under you. Well, when you move that much associated with military, you don't get to know the lady down the street who has cancer, right? Right. You're not there long enough to really develop relationships. And the other thing that's kind of tough is you don't really learn how America works. You don't really get involved in local issues and local politics. Mm-hmm. And so that was very interesting to me. And so I moved in that direction as well. But at that point, at the age of 35, 37-ish or so, I just really started to appreciate that my life was unique. Right. Because of all the influences of military service. And so I want to bridge some of those gaps, not only for our active duty people, but certainly for anybody who serves, not just veterans, but their family members. Mm-hmm. And, I call it be a part of the win, develop those mutually beneficial activities and services that help not only the military connected person, but also the civilian who's helping them out.
Right. What made you decide to go the Air Force as opposed to the Navy, since your dad was?
Well, it was really pretty logical. First of all, primarily the Air Force offered me a great incentive. I think I got promoted to captain in about 6 months, or wow. No, 2 years. 2 years. I think it's usually 4. So I got promoted quicker. And for the first 6 months, I was able to rotate to a lot of different clinical settings at the Air Force's largest hospital, which at the time was Wilford Hall. So there was a financial incentive. There was also a professional incentive, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do right after I got out. And on a personal note, just to be completely transparent, I figured that, if I joined the Navy, that, I'd probably end up marrying a guy who would have to go out to sea. And I thought, that separation might be tough. That was my thinking as an 18-year-old, right? Or 21-year-old. And so I certainly missed not being around the water, because,
you missed the boat.
Well, yeah, ha ha ha. Yeah,
No pun intended.
Yeah, that's pretty good though.
Yeah, so
that's pretty good.
You in your I guess your career, your profession was medical, right? Were you a nurse? Is that right?
Yes,
right?
yes.
And knowing that you can do that there, what did your parents think when you said, "Okay, I'm joining the Air Force"? Was your dad a little bit dismayed, like, bummer, I wish you would have?
No, not at all. My dad's a pilot and an engineer, so he's got pretty linear, logical thinking, right? So if that's what she wants to do, great, go, more power to her. We never had any discussion about, gee, why'd you join the Air Force and not the Navy?
Right.
No big deal.
But they had no issues about you joining the military either, I'm assuming, correct?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, my career was fairly traditional, if you will, for women between nursing and public affairs. But no, my parents both always encouraged me to do whatever I wanted to do, and put fire under my feet to help me make it possible,
and just go.
Yeah.
So you go through all that, and you decide, you figure out how you're going to kind of continue your career here, and then you meet your husband, who he was in the Army or the Air Force.
My first husband was in the Air Force.
Okay. And then you meet I'm assuming your current husband.
I've been married to my current husband 10 years, who's Army.
And so he had multiple deployments as well. And so
he did, but those deployments were before we got together.
Oh, he knew that. Okay, I got to get this out of the way because I got.
Well, but interestingly, I met him right after his last combat tour.
Oh, okay.
And so, as I think back on that, it gives me some insights to his transition and his adaptation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so you spend your 20 years, you do your 20 years, and then you decide, hey, I'm going to go. I'm going to get out, but I want to kind of be in a little bit. And so that's when you join the Guard, the reserves.
Well, it's sort of a complicated tale, if you will, but I spent a total of 20 years in uniform in fits and starts. I'd start and I'd stop, and I'd go to a different branch, or I'd work full time starting up our business. Mm-hmm. And then, so I think the best way to answer your question is that, simply put, I had two different primary missions, either nursing or public affairs, and I wove it through multiple branches. Now, I was only doing public affairs in the Guard. Mm-hmm. When I was in the reserve, I was a flight nurse. When I was on active duty, I was a hospital nurse. Does that answer your question?
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay.
Okay. It's complicated.
Right. Well, everybody thinks the military, you just get a gun, you go on the front lines. But no, not everybody does that. And some people, they're all over the place and they do all sorts of different things.
Well, let's talk about that, if I could dig into that a little bit from a woman's perspective. And the reason it was complicated was because, frankly, I grew up in a fairly traditional household. My father was in charge, right? Uh-huh. My mom didn't work. My mom stayed home. And so I grew up with sort of a traditional mindset about what the role of a wife and a mother is. But I wanted to be a wife, a mother, and a career military officer. I wanted all three of those.
Right.
And so it was very challenging for me to navigate that so that I felt good about myself and so that I could execute all my roles just as good as possible, right? Because the military is very demanding, and so is parenting,
right?
And unfortunately, my first marriage was also very difficult and demanding, and so there were lots of pressures, and it was hard. And so my military service, I had to kind of make some decisions, that worked around his career, that was in the best interest of our children. I have a son who had leukemia, and so I took a break in service for about 4 years. trying to, balance my husband's active duty career and mine. But I always came back. I always circled back to military service because it was just inbred in me that, service was really important. And it was just something I really wanted, was to give back and to finish up my military career.
That's cool. That's cool. And so knowing that that's what you want to do, knowing that's where you want to be. And you had that, like you said, that was like, oh, that's what I'm going to do when I get old enough, when you were a little kid.
Yes.
Right?
Well, let me talk about that. So the reason I joined the military certainly was because I was very, very proud to be an American, number one. Uh-huh. Okay. Then I loved the leadership focus of military service, the educational focus of military service, the awesome people that join. I mean, my experience in Iceland was great. I loved meeting the Marines and the sailors. Mm-hmm. But just the diversity of the population is very stimulating to me. I loved travel. I'm a lifelong learner and really appreciate learning about different cultures. And then the other thing that drew me to military service was the focus on physical fitness, because I wanted to, have really prioritize staying in shape and contributing, and just the teamwork and the camaraderie. Right. And, there's just so many appealing aspects of this. And so, those are some of the things that really, drew me in and kept me in. And, so there you go.
That's cool. That's really cool. So when you got into the reserve and you had kind of exited your full-time career in the Air Force and you were going to reserves, going to the Guard, what made you decide that? And was this in Ohio, you said? Is that correct?
So it started off in Texas.
Okay.
Then went to California, New Mexico, and then to Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah. How's that for the military story, right?
Now, was that your choice, or was that you're following your husband and he was going to those places and you were just...
Actually, yeah. I followed my husband. We were over in England as well. Mm. I got off after 6 years. His active duty career continued on a little bit. But anyway, what are you thinking?
So... You ended up in Ohio at some point.
Yes.
And you decided that you're going to really expound on life in the military and do support for veterans, and you're going to work with governors, and you're going to be tell us about your time in Ohio and how that whole thing just kind of blossomed into what it was.
Okay, thank you. So I was the community affairs manager at the 121st Air Refueling Wing in Columbus, Ohio. They hired me because of my community passions, because of my experience running a chamber of commerce, because of my personality. And so what we did was build a mission-driven community relations program that focused in on educating employers about the value of veteran talent, the skill sets that military people have. Mm-hmm. And we really wanted to keep them on our national security team because right in the Guard, about 80% of our workforce is part-time military, right? Mm-hmm. So that means they either have a full-time civilian job or they're in college.
Right.
So as they're deploying, it certainly disrupts the employer's plans and the academic plans of the soldier or airman. Mm-hmm. And so it was really important that our employers had some appreciation for, gee, you know what? Those military people are very professional, and we are lucky to have them on our team, even if there is a disruption in their work performance because of a deployment. But our country is counting on these service members to, fight the fight because, oh, by the way, when only 3 out of 10 of our citizenry is eligible for military service for a variety of reasons,
right?
We've got to make it possible for the soldiers or airmen to go on deployments, come home, and keep their jobs because, the civilian job is primarily how they pay their bills. So we wanted to keep our employers on the national security team. And to us, that meant that, it wasn't a compliance thing. It was something that they wanted to do because they believed in their employee and they were willing to make some accommodations. And, oh, by the way, of course, keep their job, which was, driven by USERRA. So this mission-driven community relations program at the largest air refueling wing in the Air National Guard at the time was noticed by the commander of the Ohio National Guard. He loved what we were doing. It was 2009, so it was a little bit after 9/11, but he realized that we really needed to mobilize the citizenry. I call him the Major General Greg Waite. I call him the citizen mobilizer. He created this position for me and my team to go out and inspire civilians and help them know how to do more. And I mentioned many of the groups. We focus mostly on employers, healthcare providers, clergy, and then we also reached out to educators, leaders of diverse communities, and I think that's it. So, we did some great things. And my book, Beyond Thank You for Your Service, the Veteran Champion Handbook for Civilians, features about 20 of those Ohioans that I worked with, worked with side by side to truly build those mutually beneficial activities and services that improve either quality of life, workforce, or community through their efforts. And the reward that they got out of it, the fulfillment, the joy, was palpable almost. You could just see it on their faces, and they would verbalize it. Yeah, it's very, very rewarding work for them and me.
Right. My wife, she grew up in a military family. Both her parents were in the Air Force as well, and her dad was actually he was one of my guests on one of my very early episodes of the podcast, and so her whole thing was just being around the military, being around that whole mindset of how everybody acted and everybody was professional and everybody was respectful. Now, obviously, that's not 100% of the time. There are people that make mistakes, because what is the military made up of? Humans, and humans, we do what we do, Right. However, for the most part, there's the discipline and there's the understanding that, you are expected to act a certain way and be a certain way because you're a professional and people rely on you. And so that whole being around that makes a huge difference. And so when you start dealing with people who have loved ones or whatever, or are around military bases or around the military, they start seeing, okay, it's like you said, it's palpable, or it is contagious. Okay, let's be this way. Let's serve other people. Obviously, these people are serving. Let's be responsible. Let's be respectful. Let's be disciplined. Let's be, integral. And we'll do what we got to do to help each other out, and we're going to have fun doing it too, because that's a huge thing. Because if somebody's not having fun, they're not going to want to do what they're doing. They're going to be willing to go somewhere else. So I totally understand and get that whole concept that once you get in there, it's kind of a and
I see it kind of two ways, right? What I'm hearing you say, Kent, is that the bond that is almost automatic amongst military people. That's kind of palpable all in of itself. I mean, I used to tell people that when I would get around military people, something like shifts in me, know? I mean, it's just a different sort of, affect, a different sort of feeling. It's sort of, I don't know, kind of a playful sense almost. That's a good word, right? It's almost playful when you're surrounded by military people. And then that's one sort of palpable experience. The other one is, though, when someone in uniform is being supported by someone who's never served. Right. The joy that civilian experiences by building that relationship with the service member, by understanding distinctions of military culture, by knowing how to what kind of interview questions to ask that will help that service member, talk about themselves,
right,
by helping support them, once they get assimilated into the workforce. It's encouraging, and it provides fulfillment for the civilian to serve our military in that way.
Right. I think there are some people that say, well, if you weren't in the military, you don't understand. And I think there are people that do. I think, and not to the point where they understand being on the front line of the battlefield, they understand the fog of war, they understand all that stuff like that. But like you said, not everybody that's in the military has gone to battle, is on the front lines. And previous to, all the folks that were in the military during the 80s and up until, they hadn't been really to war either.
Right.
You had a lot of folks that were training other, military groups, Navy SEALs or Force Recon or Green Berets or whatever, infantry, and they were being trained by people who had not necessarily been to battle.
Yeah. Right.
And so then all of a sudden we have tons of people who have everybody's been to battle.
Right. Very different. So my husband was a recruiter in the Army for half of his career. And he used to say that, prior to 9/11, there was an 80% chance that you would not deploy. I mean, I was in the reserves for years and years, and we train, and then train some more, right?
Right.
Well, after 9/11, there was an 80% chance that you would be deployed, right? And I don't know about you, but most of us, once we've been training, we would love to be able to actually perform that training and do our mission live. And so I think that was something that we looked forward to, and, we were happy to do our jobs. And so, now it's very different. And, there's 2.6 million Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. And, some of the things that we need to think about are that 55% of them feel disconnected from mainstream America. About 40% have difficulty regaining mission and purpose, or regaining touch with their spirituality. And that's particularly difficult for people who've seen combat. Okay. And so, yes, PTSD is something we need to be aware of, but we don't need to focus on it. Darn it!
Right.
If the VA reports that about 20% of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans have PTSD, so that means 80% do not. Right. And most people, if you have it, most people do well at managing their triggers. Okay, so it's not something that we want to perpetuate. It's something that we want to appreciate, right, and know how to accommodate, if needed. So, and I think that the role of civilian veteran champions is even more important than, say prior to 9/11, because of the prevalence of people who have been exposed to trauma. Now, let me pause right there and say that, it's, a lot of people move like I moved, right? You don't have to be a military family to experience a lot of moving. Okay. Right. Number one. Number two, about 2/3 of our society experiences some kind of trauma. Now, it may not be trauma on the battlefield, but it could be, sexual assault, domestic violence,
being in a car crash, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it's, you're more likely to meet a civilian with PTSD than you are a veteran with PTSD. But I think, the media has a tendency to sensationalize if something very unfortunate happens and they had a military background, that gets highlighted in the story. Right. But, trauma is very prevalent, just very prevalent. And I don't think I think we have a tendency as a society to forget that. And so, there's help that, military people need, but frankly, a lot of our people in our society are hurting. Right.
I think, if the more we know about subjects, and I think it's good that we know about subjects, whether it's PTSD, PTSI, PTS, whatever, or other trauma, or just general things, the struggles people go through, and they may not even reach the level of PTSD or
Right.
PTSI. They may just be dealing with somebody, or they live with somebody, or they're trying to support somebody who has that, or they're just trying to figure out how to pay their bills, and they've got kiddos, and life is just very overwhelming for them. We need to know how to we educate ourselves, we research on this stuff, and then we be willing to help them out and be willing to step up and support other folks like that.
Two things that come to mind when you talk about that. Okay, the first is soul injury.
Mm-hmm.
A soul injury is unmourned loss, unforgiven guilt, and shame. This term, soul injury, was developed by a group of hospice nurses who helped 10,000 veterans at their end-of-life experience in the VA hospice in Tampa, Florida, and found that people, primarily combat veterans with unmourned loss, unforgiven guilt, and shame, had a much more restless end-of-life experience. And once they were able to grieve or forgive, even in those last stages of life, they became calmer and had a more passful piecing, if you will. Now, that's really interesting and helpful because Opus Peace, this nonprofit that identifies and teaches these concepts, of which I'm a part, those lessons can now be translated over to other groups who've experienced trauma. So just think about it, right?
Okay.
Are we taught how to grieve in our society? No. Especially military people. We're taught to buck up, move on, get her done, go on, right?
Right.
And then we don't really understand as a society loss either. You know, when we take off our uniform, that's a loss. That's an identity shift. And so there's a lot of stoicism in the military, but there's a lot of stoicism, you know, for the American rugged individualism way of life as well, right? I mean, you know, we how am I? I'm fine, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, this sort of the two things I want to talk about, the Opus Peace and soul injury kind of makes, you know, recovery from trauma a universal human aspect that that we all need to be aware of. And it doesn't mean that, you know, military people are these really unique or really different people. You know, it's just in many cases, a different level of trauma.
Right.
And so, Opus Peace has created a forum called the Fallen Comrades Ceremony. And this ceremony helps our veterans, their spouses, and the community process some emotional healing. But what I love about it is that the community actually comes and experiences a testimony from a veteran who's experiencing some healing. And there's symbolic ways that a citizen can support the transition back to society and support, you know, sort of shoulder some of those burdens. And it's built off of a Native American ceremony that really helps the warrior come home, offering meaningful, substantive support. Okay, so soul injury and fallen comrade ceremony is a very positive way to help people who've experienced trauma heal. That's the first thing. Right. Okay. Do you have any questions about that before I move on?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm tracking. Okay,
thank you. So the second thing that I'm incredibly passionate about is building military ministries.
Okay.
A military ministry is a practical and spiritual support group, if you will, for military connected people. Best case scenario is positioning it inside of a place of worship.
Right.
Okay. Doesn't have to be Christian, just a place of worship, whatever your faith is. Right. And what that does is, like I talked about earlier, you know, when I get around military people, you know, I feel understood. I feel like I can make jokes and, they'll get it.
Right.
I have sort of a playful attitude. They're my group, right? They're my tribe,
Sure,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, even though, I'm part of the 15% that's female. So that's, a whole nother piece of the pie, right? That's a little different, but I've now been leading a group called Vet Connect with my husband and my local church. And we have some combat veterans. We have military moms. We have military spouses. We have some brand new sailors who are getting ready to ship out that'll show up occasionally. It is just so rewarding because what this does, Ken, is, you respond to the needs of your group. It's leadership 101, right? Who wants to get involved? What are the needs of the people? What makes sense to them? Of course, you've got to talk to the pastor or your clergy members and make sure they're on board and, that they're empowering you and that you're supporting each other because, right? Yeah. They might need the support of the pastor because, look, I'm a volunteer. I'm not a pastor. Mm-hmm. I'm a Christian. I know a little bit about the Bible. I know how to pray, but I am not a biblical scholar. And, there's only so much I can do. Right.
Right.
So our group has focused on building relationships for about 2 years. Now it's mostly women because the leadership tenet is generally leaders attract other people like themselves, right? Okay, yeah. So if you were to go out and start a military ministry in your congregation for your congregation and for your community, mm-hmm. you'd probably attract combat veterans or you'd attract other, male Marines, right?
Right.
And so the military ministry, there's no cookie cutter approach, right? But it's all about fostering that sense of belonging, mm-hmm. that sense of empathy. And, and our mission is support, encouragement, and friendship. So, during the week I'll reach out or, we're now just starting to get into some community service projects, but there is a lot of ways that these military ministries can be approached. I mean, it's different if you have, 18 to 33-year-olds in your group as compared to having, 58 to 93, World War II, Vietnam veterans, right. Et cetera. Mm-hmm. And they're just super powerful to foster that sense of connection that decreases. Oftentimes military people can tend to isolate, right?
Yep.
That decreases that because somebody out there cares about you. Somebody out there knows what you're going through, right? And it's not an agency. There's no bureaucracy with getting support.
Right. It's human to human here. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that's the human to human piece that, we're kind of missing because first of all, military people are stoic.
Yeah.
Second of all, military people don't like to ask for help.
Right.
They don't have good help seeking behaviors. Right. And third of all, they feel disconnected. So how can we help them feel connected? So every Sunday, the first Sunday of every month, I'm offering an opportunity for people to come together with me on a Zoom call mm-hmm. to learn about how to start that ministry. Basically, if you don't have to be a veteran,
right?
You need to love our military and have some knowledge, but I will provide some more of that knowledge. Mm-hmm. You need to have some knowledge about military culture and about some of the things you might want to be on the lookout for.
Right.
And then also about the resources. That's a big part of this, Ken, is knowing what's out there to refer people because, I'm not a counselor. I'm not a pastor. I'm someone who loves the military and wants to help them assimilate and connect. And so if once you bring these people together, if you have some idea of what you might expect, some of the resources in the community, and you have some leadership skills, and you basically, lead with your heart. So between understanding, soul injury, unmourned loss, unforgiven guilt and shame, and, maybe getting involved in a military ministry, these are things that civilians and veterans mm-hmm. can get involved with to really build that human to human contact, to promote healing and to foster those connections. And so those are some great strategies to really, go beyond thank you for your service.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds a lot like, in the police world, we talk about the, critical incident debrief, and you get around and you talk about these things that bothered you and about your certain call or whatever like that. This is on a grand scale of of years of being in or seeing things that you know, and not knowing how you can talk about it. And because you're not necessarily around anybody that's in the military. And so you don't know if you can talk about it. Well, there's people that maybe haven't been in the military, but they sympathize with you. They empathize with you because they kind of have an understanding whether they've been in some traumatic issues or they've had family members or whatever, but they've had enough information given to them that now they're able to, that they know you as a human. They may not know your exact issue or problem or frustration or struggle, but they know you as a human and they know how to get you through that survivor's guilt or through that thing, and they can just be there for you. And that makes a huge difference. And we don't think about that a lot, as far as we just think, okay, the military will take care of the military. Police officers will take care of police officers.
Yes.
And firefighters will take care of firefighters.
Yes.
That's not what life is. Life is
no.
And I say this every single time. We're on this planet to serve other people. And that's why we're on this planet, for other people.
Yeah.
Whether and I can come alongside somebody, I may not know what their issue is, what their problem, what their struggle, but I know that they're human, and I know that they need love, and they need caring, and they need a friend.
Yep.
I also liken it to this. What it is that you've got a big ocean liner, whether it's a warship from the Navy or a cruise ship or whatever, and it's coming into port. That thing's not able to necessarily navigate that port by itself.
Yeah, nice.
It needs you need a tugboat. You need a little something just kind of nudge you one side or the other, and to help guide you in there so you can restock, refuel, reset yourself, get new passengers, get new whatever, and then help guide you back out to sea and say, hey, you're on your own. You're doing great. You're ready for it. And it goes out there. And so that's what you are. That's what we need to be as servants of helpers of our fellow man. And whether it's the military, whether it's police officers, firefighters, whatever hero you are.
So I love how you talked about sort of our silo mentality in our society, right? Because, first of all, I don't think it's realistic to expect DoD and the VA to do everything for our service members. Yeah. All right. I don't know about you, but national security is really complex, right?
Yeah.
So DoD needs to, certainly focus on that, and certainly has responsibility for, helping us transition home. The VA, I'm a master's prepared nurse. I get, again, how complex healthcare is. Right. Okay. But they need to be the SME, the subject matter expert for everything healthcare. And there's just this horrible gap, Kevin, where, whose job, Ken, sorry, whose job is it? Sorry about that. Whose job is it to educate our citizenry about how they can use their knowledge, their circle of influence, their interests to create that human to human touch and to make a difference, and not only say, thank you for your service. There's a lot more that you can do. So I contend that we should have a national PR campaign that busts the myths that are associated with military service, be it, that says, no, PTSD isn't the end of the world, right? People get through that and do well. That talks about some of the other myths, and that, basically portrays our military people as sound, resilient, professional, ready to go, great workers, great community assets.
Right.
I wish we had that PR campaign. And then I also wish that there was someone, a lot of people like me who potentially had, okay, this is really what we need from our lawyers. Okay, this is how they can be most effective in helping our service members reach an optimal quality of life. Right. Then someone who would address, what do healthcare professionals need to know? Behavioral health physicians, how can they be, really on their toes and sensitive to the needs of a patient who has military service? Okay. I'm also very involved in helping employers understand how to find veteran talent, how to interview and assimilate veteran talent and become veteran ready. We need an entity in our society that focuses in on helping our employers leverage the skill sets that veterans bring to the workforce, because guess what? Everybody wins. right?
Yeah.
Military people are more productive. They're less absent. They're more mission focused. They know how to lead. They know how to follow. You went through some of this early on.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if our employers don't really get how to do this well, then they're not getting the benefit of all those years of military service, because military service does strengthen a lot of workforce attributes.
Right,
okay.
right.
Now there's also some things potentially that could be polished. We military people can be a little direct, or we can
Yeah.
be a little bit, some people might perceive us to be bossy or abrasive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes, and so there's some polishing that maybe could be done, but I contend that military people are adaptable. Certainly they're highly trainable.
Yeah.
And in most cases, very receptive to coaching and very receptive to, growing and learning, because, they want to be effective. They want to find their next purpose and mission. And so we as a society not only need a PR campaign to boost the image of military people and what we bring to the civilian fight, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
number one,
Mm-hmm.
and number two, I think it'd just be great if we had trainers, people like me, who were all about cultivating civilian veteran champions in ways that would optimize
Mm-hmm.
the military members' return to civilian society.
Right.
So I get pretty passionate about that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's, and that's fantastic, because that's not something that you hear about all the time. And but because a lot of times I think, I don't know per se, but people look at it. I think right now they're looking at, I just want a body, I want a pulse to come in here and work. I can't find anybody, and everybody's trying to find people to come to work. But there's also a good number of veterans who are like, I'm getting out and I have no idea what I'm going to go do.
Right.
I'm trying to figure it out, and I want to do something worthwhile. I don't want to just flip burgers.
Let's touch on this for a minute. If there's any veterans or people transitioning out there listening. So I'm a leadership development coach and, or leadership trainer, personal growth coach. And I think for me, because I move so much, I think for me, because I was a female in a man's world in the military, and because I've had so many different roles, right? Yeah. A full-time military officer, a part-time military officer, a full-time mom, a part-time. Well, I was always a mom, but a stay-at-home mom or whatever. And I've worked in like 6 different industries and had like 17 different jobs. I mean, my life has just been, a lot of variety, right? And so when you're faced with a lot of variety, you have to learn how to deal with a lot of different people, become, fairly self-aware, if you will, kind of get a feel for, who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. But when we're in the military, oftentimes, more often than not, we are told what our job's going to be, right?
Right.
We may have some opportunity to elect what we want to do, but more often than not, we're saying, okay, this is what you're going to do. This is who you're going to work with. This is where you're going to live. This is what you've got to wear. This is when you eat, this is where you shop, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of decisions made for you. But in terms of, when you take off your uniform and you go back to civilian life, it is a process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is not straightforward, simple, or easy, because most of our time in the military, we have focused on the needs of others, focused on the needs of the mission, and may not be very much in tune with who we are as individuals. That's very possible, especially if you join as a youngster, right? 18 to 20 or whatever, right? So if anybody out there is listening and you're transitioning, take the time, do those personality assessments. Go to let's see, how else could you take courses that help you understand where your aptitudes are.
Right.
Oh, by the way, go look at those military skills translators. There's a great one called ONET. Maybe you're an HR professional listening or you're a veteran. Go look at ONET military skills translator. And okay, this is a great example. So let's say you're an 11 Bravo in the Army, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do? They're infantry. What do? They're trained primarily to be on the battlefield and do the nation's really hard work up to and including killing other people.
Mm-hmm.
They are the people on the battlefield, right? Well, if you look in this skills translator by ONET, O''NET, it will take an 11 Bravo, that's an MOS in the Army,
Mm-hmm.
and it will look to see what kind of civilian jobs that 11 Bravo is well suited for. And interestingly enough, an 11 Bravo can be a training and development manager, because based on the knowledge, skills, and abilities, or KSAs,
Mm-hmm.
that 11 Bravo infantry gal has learned a lot of those skills along the way because of all the other wonderful things that we learn in the military.
Right.
And so that helps the HR professional and also the military member transitioning to know maybe what kinds of jobs you might feel comfortable doing.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, taking the tests, understanding your aptitudes, being patient with yourself, looking at the military skills translators, but asking for help and networking. We in the military are not necessarily good networkers. All right.
Right.
We're comfortable around our tribe. But then outside of the tribe, you start feeling a little awkward. Well, get over it, if I may be so bold, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Get over it. Get out there and be with people. Introduce yourself. Ask questions. Ask for help. And find people who are willing to help you, because you know what? They're everywhere. You can use those agencies. Sometimes their responsiveness can be frustrating. Go to your local Kiwanis. Go to your local PTA.
Mm-hmm.
Go to your local, sporting club or whatever. Find people in your community who are networked, who, will help you get to know people, get to know decision makers.
Yeah.
Who will give you an opportunity, and then learn how to sell yourself, right? Learn how to self-promote. That's not something we're good at.
It is not something you're good at. No. I mean, trust me, for somebody who's starting a podcast, who has started a podcast, and I try to promote the podcast itself, and you're like, oh, hey, let's listen to it. Why should I listen to it? That's a good question, because it's good. How do you promote? You put that out there, and you really have to take chances. You really have to.
And again, the military mindset is there's no I in team.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're out, competing for a position, you've got to know what your strengths and weaknesses are. You've got to be articulate.
Yeah.
You've got to, not just answer questions when they're asked, but initiate the conversation.
Mm-hmm,
and it's a skill, like everything in life. It's a skill. You didn't know how to be, in the military. You were taught. All right. Well, you don't know how to be out in civilian world either, depending on your life experience. Go learn and find the skills that you need to be successful. Only you can do it,
Right. You're in charge of you. It's just like you're going to be the one who can control whether you get angry or happy or sad or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to be the one in control. So it's like when you go to that interview with HR or whatever, and tell us about yourself. What's your 5-year plan or whatever?
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have one. And you're like, I'm not good on talking about myself, because what do you do in the military? You put in for whatever rank you want.
Yeah.
I mean, as to promote. And then whether you meet the criteria or you've reached that, that's one thing. But here in the civilian world, you have to go talk about yourself. And it's like, look, I've done this, and I've done this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And you don't want to, is that they're going to take this way? Or are they going to take it that way? I don't know. And so it's hard to do that. However, you got to do it. You got to step out of that comfort zone. You just got to. This is what I did, and I'm a Billy badass.
Go find someone to practice. You're a badass.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, but I mean that's what you got to go up there and you got to tell them. You got to promote yourself as that.
Right. Strut your stuff. That's what I'd call it.
That's right.
Right. Strut your stuff. And I would recommend people role play. The interview process and be proud of yourself without being arrogant, right?
Mm-hmm.
without being entitled, right?
Right.
So along that line, I love to come alongside employers and help them learn how to build connections in the veteran community to distinguish their brand as veteran friendly. Okay. I help them find sources of veteran talent, either locally or nationally. And then I help them move from being veteran friendly to being veteran ready as a consultant and a trainer to help them understand military culture, to know how to use military skills translators, know how to interview, know how to set up a veteran employee resource group. Because at the end of the day, Ken, at the end of the day, we hope that the current veteran employees are going to go outside that company and become the recruiting force, right?
Right.
I mean, I've had employers tell me that, oh yeah, I went to this local guard base, a construction company went to this local guard base and took and hired their first Red Horse member or civil engineer. And they came down to the civilian company and they're like, wow, this guy is great. He's got these values, attributes, skill sets, and knows how to build things. Right. And so then what ended up happening is more and more of this unit members' friends from the Air National Guard unit started joining this company. And that's how it works. All relationships are, human to human, as you said earlier.
Right.
And if your military member has a great experience inside your company, and I will help you make that happen. If your military person has a great experience, then guess what? Their buddies will start joining you, and then it's really a win-win for the employer and the military member.
Right. So is that what Vanguard Veteran is?
Vanguard Veteran does three things. First, helps employers source, hire, retain veteran talent. I am your veteran hiring concierge. If you go to my website, I offer a free veteran ready assessment and 1 hour of coaching calls to talk about where you are on the veteran ready spectrum, if you will. 1 hour of free coaching to get acquainted and see how I might be able to support you. Also, I am the military ministry builder. If you go to my website, I offer a military ministry quiz to kind of help the prospective volunteer leader or the clergy member understand kind of where they are in the process.
Right.
And again, an hour of coaching to help evaluate where you are and where you might want to go. And then last, I'm a leadership development trainer and coach. Love to help people with public speaking, come on site to provide leadership courses, primarily based on the teachings of John Maxwell, but also my learning as well. So my website is vanguardveteran.com. My email is Kathy with a K at vanguardveteran.com. So I love to help people who have never served in uniform know how to be successful hiring and retaining veteran talent. I love to work with veterans who want to become better public speakers, who want to become better leaders, and or veterans or civilians who want to lead military ministries. Right. And then there's the Fallen Comrades ceremony in there too. That's also on my website. There's a video of it. It's great for any community. And it's just so powerful for people who have served and are citizens so that they have more appreciation and they can share in the burdens of military service.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. You know, that the fact that you have there are options out there. There are resources that our veterans can use, and you just may not know what your next step is. These Vanguard Veteran can help you figure out what your next step is. Right.
Right. And for civilians, primarily helping civilians know how to be more supportive and be a part of the win. If so I'd love to talk to a veteran about helping them get involved in starting a military ministry, love to help a veteran through leadership development courses. So yeah, I have a mixed bag of opportunities, but
that's so
think about being, I'm essentially the veteran hiring concierge, the military ministry builder, and a leadership trainer, developer, and coach.
Right. And you have a book, correct?
Yes. The book is Beyond Thank You for Your Service, the Veteran Champion Handbook, for civilians. It can be found on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it features my military story and how military life influenced me, some of which I've shared today on the podcast.
Yep.
And then it talks about employers, lawyers, doctors, educators, community leaders, and clergy who are actually doing this good work to promote quality of life, workforce, and community.
Yeah,
they're
cool.
inspiring, and it'll jumpstart you on your way towards becoming that veteran champion. And if you're a veteran, please, the book is $12 on Amazon. It's really inexpensive, right?
It's worth
Please
getting.
give it to your employers, give it to your pastors, give it to the educators of your children in school.
Mm-hmm.
There's something in there for everyone, and it really makes it easy and practical for civilians to join the Veteran Champion movement.
Yeah. See, and that's so cool. That is so awesome. I can't thank you enough for coming on and talking about this stuff, because this is a topic that doesn't necessarily get touched on too often.
Yeah,
we talk about the veteran, how they are, and we talk about, the police officer and everything else that we talk about, but the support system for those folks, that's where it really comes in. It's that like I said, that tugboat who needs to come in and be that one that's going to come in and kind of help guide you.
We need to be multidisciplinary. We need to bridge understandings, because if we keep, oftentimes veterans support veterans, firefighters support firefighters, police support police,
right?
Women support women, LGBT support LGBT, right? We, in this day of diversity, equity, inclusion, we need to be bridging those gaps. And really promoting that human to human contact that's knowledgeable, mm-hmm. and that's resourced, right? So that if somebody gets into an uncomfortable space, they know what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's so cool to get that we use the citizens, the regular civilians.
Yes.
To do that. And it's not yes. like you're less or anything like that. Everybody is needed. Everybody is needed to help everybody. So. Yep,
everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and one of the biggest, I'll just use the word gap again, is that military people don't typically have civilian networks, right? Mm-hmm. Military people hang out with military people because that's where their comfort zone is a lot of times.
Yep.
But and maybe this is a good place to end. The best things in life come from having long-term relationships.
Yes.
Because those people know who you are.
Yep.
They've seen you through thick or thin. They've seen your character. They've seen, how you've recovered from challenges, and they believe in you, Kev.
Right.
They believe in you.
Right.
And a military person who, has, like me, who has multiple jobs, lived in multiple states, multiple countries, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. You're always reinventing yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I like to say the best things in life, are like, okay, they come from people who believe in you. Someone who knows your aptitudes and your strengths based on previous performance and will vouch for you in your next job, right? Will give you a chance to perform and maybe something that you've never done 100% of, but you can, translate it. Okay. Someone who, let's just say, if someone knows you well and they know somebody in the community, maybe there's somebody that you might want to know and be a prospective mate, right?
Yeah,
you have, it's usually comes through someone who knows the guy well, the girl well, whatever the case may be, and they put them together. And then in my case, what really hit hard for me too was when you have long-standing relationships, you don't necessarily have to ask strangers to babysit your children.
Right. Yes.
And so that human to human, that trusting relationship, that foundation, that network, our military people don't oftentimes have that. Even if they grew up somewhere, went away to military service for 3 or 4 years, mm-hmm. and came back, right? Their support system has shifted.
Sure.
People have moved on with their life.
They've grown, they've changed, everything.
That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that that building that connection, going, encouraging the civilian to go at least halfway to include the military person in their clubs, to invite them to get to know them. And oh, by the way, April is month of the military child, right? So there's a certificate on my website that you can download in my blog that to give to a military kid, someone like me who moved and moved and moved and moved. Isn't it great to also thank them? So there's a lot of ways civilians can get involved in supporting the assimilation back into the civilian workforce, because the mindset is different, as you pointed out at the beginning of this podcast. It takes a long time to make a civilian a warrior, and it takes a long time to return that warrior back to society. We need all of our citizenry involved in doing that.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure what that means, please get the book, Beyond Thank You for Your Service, the Veteran Champion Handbook for Civilians, on Amazon, or reach out to me at Kathy at VanguardVeteran.com. Kathy with a K.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy. Lieutenant Colonel Galowitz. I appreciate it. Good. We're gonna be very proper here.
That's all good.
I can't thank you enough for coming on, and it's been absolutely just a fantastic talking with you. So, I appreciate it. I know you got some things you got to get going to. So, once again, thank you. Do you have any final words you want to say, just to kind of encourage everybody on their way out?
I want to thank all those military people who have served for your sacrifices, up to and including our Vietnam veterans. We are so proud of you. We're so grateful for all that you have done. Our Gold Starred Wives, yesterday was Gold Starred Wives Days. Thank you for your incredible sacrifices. Thanks to all those military children out there who put up with their parents' military service and, do the best they can to transition all those things. And to our citizenry, our employers and our faith community leaders, please, please, please get involved. Roll up your sleeves. Really try to understand military people, because you benefit. Our workforce benefits when you really hire and retain veteran talent well. Yeah. And please join me in my quest to build military ministries. Take a look at my website, VanguardVeteran.com. Let me know how I can support you. And please take the quizzes that I offer.
Perfect. All right, Kath, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on, and I hope you have a great day.
I appreciate you, Ken. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, you too. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And Lieutenant Colonel Gallowitz has left the building, so to speak. And, you can't think about the amount of work that somebody like that, the amount of work that goes into doing those things and making sure that there are opportunities for people, and not just opportunities for the veteran, but opportunities for the civilian that wants to support and wants to be there and help out. And, to, the spouses, to the children of veterans, you guys really put out so much that you don't even, it's hard to be able to, put it in bullet points. Okay, I did this and I did this and I did this. There's just so much. And so it's appreciated more than you can imagine. And the fact that there are people willing to help out the veterans, because they give so much. They give up to including their lives for this. And it's such a different of a career, of a profession, because you think about the person that's they're going to go install HVAC, or they're going to go plumber, or you could be a plumber, or they're going to, be a florist or whatever. They're not thinking about giving their lives. They're thinking about doing the job and then going home. They plan their stuff out for the weekend and, whatever else occurs. But the veteran, the police officer, the firefighter, they might have those same plans, but those plans may get interrupted, and they can't do it alone. They can't just go out there and just say, hey, I'm doing this alone. There's a point where you start losing your why. Why am I doing this? And for those support systems, you are the why a lot of times. So, like I said, thank you so much for doing that. It's gosh, I don't even have the words for it. So nevertheless, if you are interested in helping out, get a hold of Kathy, or interested in starting your own portion like she was talking about, get a hold of her, vanguardveteran.com or Kathy at vanguardveteran.com. Get a hold of her. That way she'll be able to help you out. She's got all those things that she talked about. It's an awesome way to go about doing, being a support system for other people. But if you want to get a hold of the What's a Hero podcast, or you want to get all of our previous episodes, you can go on to our website, the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com. Go into all the, you'll get all of our prior episodes. You have links to your favorite podcast platform. You can download from there. You can subscribe from there. If you do that, the subscription, they'll let you know, hey, this next episode is up and running. And then you'll be able to download it and you'll be able to listen to it. You go on a road trip where you don't have service, you'll be able to have it. You know, you have to get on a plane, you have to travel, you'll be able to have that. You know, you don't have to worry about just listening to it on the website. So download it, subscribe, and then leave a comment too. I am challenging you guys to leave me a funny comment so I know, because what I'll do is I will showcase that, and I'll even bring it on the app. I'll start going over comments on the podcast. So that would be pretty cool too. Nevertheless, thank you all of you guys that do listen. You can get a hold of us on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. You can get a hold of me on LinkedIn and Twitter. You can find us all on there, and we will be just ready and willing to interact with folks, and know that the heroes that are out there and the people that support them are a priority. Because without you guys, without our nurses and our teachers and our veterans and our police officers and our firefighters and our EMTs, without you guys, we would not have the world that we live in today. The fact that we are safe, the fact that we are able to live in relative peace, because there are others who are willing to stand up to evils of this world. And I can't thank you enough. And I know there are a ton of people who can't thank you enough, and your service is appreciated. So thank you so much. So for Lieutenant Colonel Kathy Galowitz and Vanguard Veteran, I am Ken Frownfelter, and this has been the What's a Hero podcast. We are clear.